Hello everyone, my name is George Banks and I am your instructor for this course. This short video is just meant to provide you with a brief overview of the course. So we'll walk through the Canvas course shell, talk briefly about the syllabus and some of the assignments, and then I'll give you an opportunity to get to know me a little bit better on in terms of my research interests, my teaching experience, and so forth. So basically what you're seeing now is the student view in Canvas from my perspective. So you can see we have the home tab, announcements, the syllabus, where you can find, of course, the syllabus. Modules, right now what's available to you is the Start Here module. You're watching already the video to walk you through the course. There's a fun icebreaker here where you get to introduce yourself, talk about your career goals, what you do for fun, and play the game Two Truths and a Lie. And so I've kicked things off by telling two truths and a lie about myself. See if you can guess what the lie is. Your first assignment, which is your personal position statement, so this is due July 10th, and it's a chance to kind of get the gears turning, thinking about leadership and teams. And it'll be fun, I think, to see by the end of the semester if some of your thoughts and ideas have changed. Your team assignment, so everyone has been essentially assigned to a team. This will help to, I think, break up some of the discussion on the discussion board. We have a rather large class with about 20 people. It's kind of hard to have online discussions with 20 people on one discussion board, so I've broken you up into 4 different teams for each of the module discussions. And then, of course, the syllabus, which we'll be walking through in just a moment. You'll see that the first module is available, and so I'll post a new module each week. So an introduction to the module, your first reading in your textbook. You can see here, this is where, if you're in Team 1, you'll post on this discussion board, Team 2, and so forth. And we'll continue this discussion. We're talking about, continuing this type of discussion, we're talking about leadership versus management, some of the readings for being a leader, the Woodcarver podcast, which you'll listen to, and then your first journal activity. So at the end of each module, you'll post a journal, basically reflecting on what you've discussed throughout the module. And this is also where you'll reflect on your leadership project, which is essentially where you're trying to apply some of the concepts that we're discussing in this course to a real-world context. Okay, so the syllabus, I've highlighted here your required textbook for this course, as well as the RBSE assignment, which I'll talk about in just a moment. I'm just going to skim over the syllabus and let you read it in greater depth on your own time, but we have here, of course, the course description, the tentative date, so you can see when each module is available and when each module is due, course objectives, the grading scale, the breakdown of the various assignments, so your personal position statement worth 10%, group participation on the discussion boards is worth 50%, so obviously a very big chunk of your grade is based on you posting on the discussion boards and also responding to and dialoguing with your students, your classmates, and myself. The leadership development project / journal, where you're reflecting on a lot of the course concepts that we're discussing and trying to apply them in your personal and career. And then ultimately the reflected best self exercise, which I'll talk about here in just a moment. I've posted some additional guidelines to enhance your learning experience and also participation, my course communication policy, code of conduct, and the honor code. And then finally, some additional resources related to disability accommodation, religious accommodation, the Writing Center, computer help, mental health, and online tutoring options. Okay, so the reflected best self exercise is essentially an opportunity for you to essentially reflect on some of your strengths, your developmental needs, and ultimately develop an action plan to proceed in order to continue to improve yourself. So essentially what you'll do in the first phase is identify potential people, 15 to 20 people, that can provide you with a short story. When I say short, I mean 1 to 2 paragraphs, and we'll talk about some examples of these, but basically a story kind of reflecting on when you're at your best, right? And the more specific details someone can provide, the better, but typically we're thinking about 1 to 2 paragraphs in total. And then you could also essentially write your own best self story of kind of an example of when you've been at your best, when you've done something great. What you'll ultimately then do is analyze all these stories together and compose a reflected best self portrait. Then once you've done that analysis, you'll think about things that have enabled you or blocked you in terms of what you've been trying to accomplish. And then, as I mentioned before, what you'll ultimately do is create an action plan. This will ultimately be a 10-page paper, so a relatively short paper. All the stories and tables that you create will go into an appendix. There's also a rubric that's available on Canvas that you can see how the papers will be scored. Very briefly, in terms of more specific steps, the research has shown that ultimately about 30 stories would be the optimal number. I'd recommend I'll just reiterate, these slides are available on Canvas so that you can read them in greater depth, but I'd recommend making a list of people that you know, family, friends, people from current jobs, past jobs, maybe some volunteering experiences, and trying to approach these individuals and ultimately trying to get, again, approximately about 30 stories from these groups of people. Okay? So you'll read each story, reflect on the story. I'd like you to put this information together into a table. So who provided the story, what are some of the positive behaviors, what are some of the themes that emerged, look for reoccurring behaviors across all stories, and ultimately some themes. Basically then providing a summary of what those themes are, declarations, and ultimately some examples from each one of those patterns and themes. You'll ultimately use this to compose the reflected best self-portrait. In terms of the length of this in your paper, it's only going to be, I think, all this analysis and discussion to this point will only be approximately about half of your paper or so. You want to provide some time to develop an action plan. So basically, once you've completed that initial phase, sort of the first half of the project, you should be thinking about how can I use this knowledge to basically improve the quality of my work and personal life? How might I incorporate this into my current job, relationships, future career plans? How can I essentially manage your limitations or address these developmental needs? And so this is where you might then begin to discuss some enablers and blockers, those that might be personal, relational, situational. And I'm going to, just for the sake of time, skim over this, discuss essentially what your weaknesses are. And then as you're doing this, compose these types of information into tables. And again, enablers, blockers, so forth. And so these would all be tables that would go into your appendix. And then finally, I think one of the most important takeaways is creating an action plan. And when I've done this in the past with other MBA students, I think this is what people perceive to be ultimately a very promising deliverable from all of this hard work, essentially creating an action plan that helps you to think, okay, how can I grow and develop based on the information that I've created? So for example, if you came up with a theme related to developing visions, you might think about choices you have to make in coming days, weeks, and months, so forth. And so this would be a sample reflection of essentially how you might talk about doing things on a day-to-day basis, week-to-week, month-to-month, year-to-year. Okay. So this would be an example action plan. And ultimately, I'd recommend you going and reading the manual in greater depth. So again, that was one of the required course materials. I'm of course happy to take questions and to work with you throughout the semester. Also, even look at earlier drafts of the paper, so forth. And again, this is just meant to be a very brief overview. A couple of other things I wanted to discuss. Let's see. So this would be the first module again. As I mentioned before, you have your personal position paper that is due July 10th. Once we complete the first module, the second module will be available. As the summer goes on, I'll begin to try to make these modules available in advance because I know people have travel plans and other things that come up in your personal life. So you're welcome to work at least a little bit ahead, although make sure you're continuing to dialogue with your fellow classmates on the discussion boards. Okay, and so then I would just like to wrap up briefly by giving you an introduction to myself so you can get to know me a little bit better. I am, again, George Banks. The course is Leadership, Group Dynamics, and Team Building. This is a picture of me. I worked for Longwood University from 2012 to 2015. I'm currently at the University of North Carolina at Charlotte. I have a PhD in management, specifically organizational behavior and human resources, and a master's degree in industrial and organizational psychology, which is essentially the same thing as organizational behavior. Prior to going into academics, I was a consultant. I did small to mid-size consulting with small to mid-size companies. So, for example, I worked with HR 411, which was an online resource for a lot of these companies that didn't have a formal HR department. So basically, I did consulting with this company. We worked with lots of companies that varied in size. We wrote primarily policies for employment handbooks. We did training guides. We did develop audio training podcasts, which HR folks would use for certification, and we conducted HR audits. While I enjoy doing the administrative side of HR, I wanted to focus more on learning and development. I thought that would be more fun. So I worked for Human Technology, and basically there we had a contract with the Office of Personnel Management. We worked with a diverse group of clients ranging from the Missile Defense Agency to the Forest Service, Patent and Trade Office, Geospatial Intelligence Agency, etc. And primarily we worked there with those agencies to create individual leadership competency models, so identifying knowledge, skills, and abilities that an individual needed to have to be successful at various levels within their organization. We did a lot of executive coaching based on 180 and 360-degree assessment tools, and then we did quite a bit of training related to developing communication skills like related to conflict management, situational leadership, and team development. In terms of courses that I've taught, I have worked at a lot of Virginia schools, Virginia Commonwealth University. I taught managerial skill development, organizational behavior, human resource management. Taught research methods and statistics at University of Richmond. At Longwood, I had the opportunity to teach business ethics, management application, skill development, this same course, Management 564, and then also HR. And then at University of North Carolina, I've taught acquiring and maintaining talent, which is an HR course, organizational behavior, human behavior at the MBA level, and then also statistics classes. My research areas are pretty broad. I do quite a bit of HR research related to personnel selection. I also do research related to strategic HR, so looking at differential pay allocations within organizations, looking at recruiting at a strategic level within organizations. Within the organizational behavior area, I've done quite a bit of research, published numerous papers on leadership and teams, transformational leadership, authentic leadership, leader-member exchange, exchange within teams, charismatic leadership, so forth. I've done quite a bit of research on personality, including the Big 5 personality traits, which we'll talk about in this course, as well as dark triad personality traits. And then I've also done some work related to ethics and counterproductive work behaviors. And then I also do a fair amount of research methods work related to meta-analysis and questionable research practices and other things related to that. Alright, and so just to wrap up on a more personal level, big fan of the Washington Redskins, which is kind of hard to do. They had a not so bad year last year, but they'll probably regress this year. My favorite TV shows include Survivor, Big Bang Theory, Modern Family, Game of Thrones. I love dogs. This is one of my Chocolate Labs, Graham, who's sitting right next to me, listening to this video along with yourself. My other dog is Baloo. He's very sweet. He's a little bit more mischievous than Graham, and thankfully Graham is very patient with him. They are the best of friends. This is my wife. She is a postdoc in microbiology here at University of North Carolina at Charlotte. And this is my daughter, Mia. She's now 2 years old, and she's just an absolute delight. So that's a little bit more about me on a personal level. I really look forward to getting to know you all much better in this course, but also at the residency. So I will be there for a couple of days, and we'll be doing the ropes course. So please feel free to let me know if you have any questions, and I look forward to working with you.